When the celestial decree announced the restoration of the divine determiner's authority above, the atmosphere darkened as everything went awry. Furious, he descended, intending to quickly strike down the young sect leader with a fatal blow. However, his action was thwarted because the celestial decree decided who lived and died that night. Subsequently, he began admonishing the celestial survivor, stating, "From now on, when I command you to bark, you bark like a dog, and you shall suffer according to your true identity." The events concluded with the celestial decree assassinating the young sect leader candidate of the four sects, leading to his imprisonment in the blood reversal prison. Despite not causing any loss of rationality or immediate effects, the consequences of his actions were severe. The haunting voice of his deceased mother constantly echoed in his head, causing excruciating pain. It wasn't until the 5th day after using his key to calm his mind that he could alleviate the residual effects. Once completely drained, he was imprisoned for 10 days. The four sects lost their candidates, facing threats and responsibilities. But the sword demon sect vehemently opposed, thwarting their intentions. Suddenly after, the two brothers met again. "I saved you as promised, so don't reveal the incident of the blood reversal prison." Over time, the celestial decree complaining to the divine survivor, "You said there were no side effects, but do you know how much I suffer from the torment of hallucinations? Because you shared our mother's blood and saved me, I won't kill you, but never come near me again." Indeed, his subordinate back then wasn't simply seeking revenge for loved ones. He knew that once one crossed the line, there was no turning back. A year later, on the day the Supreme Sect Leader announced the succession of the Sect Leader position, the celestial decree still retained his life due to heavenly mercy. However, he was too weak to bear the authority of the Sect Leader, which wasn't just about power but also responsibility. The fate of 100,000 disciples rested on his shoulders. He pleaded with the divine survivor, willing to devote his life to the celestial divine sect. Subsequently, the celestial decree officially received the sect leader position to honor his promise to the supreme sect leader. He suppressed his resentment, but years of accumulated anger couldn't easily dissolve. Thus, he didn't harbor affection for his wives acquired through tradition. His sudden rise to the sect leader role left him with weaker martial arts skills than the elders, so he fervently trained day and night. With administrative duties handled, he focused solely on martial arts, with his sole pleasure being his wife, the mother of Thien Pham. Perhaps this was his destiny. Despite his spiritual aspirations, he couldn't resist the allure of beauty. Initially, he found the servant girl cute and engaged in casual conversation. However, gradually, he became enamored with Ho Yen, a girl whose mere words and gestures could move him deeply. She was his son. Months later, she became pregnant with his child. This went against the teachings of the sect, and Ho Yen was supposed to leave the city quietly, but she insisted on staying, seeking protection from him. Eventually, the revelation of Ho Yen's pregnancy caused turmoil. Despite his efforts to arrange a wedding, the sect leaders vehemently opposed, causing chaos until the supreme sect leader resigned, leaving the celestial decree to confront the situation directly. Ho Yen couldn't stay at the sect leader's residence but remained nearby. Although her abode wasn't as luxurious, they both hoped for a future together. However, the more they yearned for happiness, the more the wives of the grand sect leaders became jealous. One day, the supreme sect leader suddenly disappeared. The celestial divine sect searched for him, but news was suppressed. Ultimately, the Dark Alliance's overlord led a large army to the celestial divine sect at Guizhou, sparking a 6-month-long battle. No one could stop him. 2 elders, brothers unrelated to Thien Du, perished, leaving the sect leader to intervene. Since the war began, Ho Yen had been deteriorating, and despite the celestial decree's struggle to choose between her and the sect, she insisted on his participation for the sect's safety. Reluctantly, he made this decision, unaware it would be his final meeting with his beloved amidst the conflict between the celestial divine sect and the Dark Alliance. At first, the celestial decree's power was futile against the opponent's might, and he was overwhelmed, unable to resist. Each attack leaves him defenseless. Eventually, the overlord, Ho Yen, mocked him, realizing that someone like him had ascended to such a position. However, thanks to him, the celestial decree will be remembered in history. Posterity will hail Emperor Hoang An as the master who defeated the demonic sect. At that time, The celestial current declared indifference to matters, but what he remembered most was the weak and pale face of the imperial concubine Huadian. Then the blood-reversing great divine art once again awakened the demon blood disorder within his body. This surprised Hoang An. His wounds had healed, and his strength had increased hugely. His speed surpasses that of the opposing emperor of the evil sect. The martial world could not have anticipated this turn of events. Consequently, the martial artists of Trungguyen were forced to retreat, and Emperor Hoang An was hailed as one of the 5 great masters of the martial world. However, news within the sect waiting for his return. The imperial concubine Huayen had passed away. Baek Trong Vu reveals the cause of her death. She had been poisoned by the sect leader. Despite searching all sects for the culprit, they could not be found. This left him even more despondent. The consequences of the blood-reversing great divine art haunted him. During the mourning period for the imperial concubine, his presence was absent due to his overwhelming pain and continuous hallucinations. All the walls in the martial arts training room seemed to be stained with blood. He constantly cried out in agony, all because of this child. Therefore, Emperor Hoang tried to keep himself sober. He was always afraid of losing this child, just as he had lost Huayan. Time passed, and 5 years later, the sect leader could return. Facing numerous shocks, Emperor Hoang's demeanor changed completely. His once emotionless face became colder. He became indifferent to everything, except for Thien Pham. If he neglects the concubines of the Luk Dai Tong sect, this child will face danger. The concubines promised that Kong too would be banned from martial arts training until he joined the demonic sect to learn about demonic techniques. That Kong too had been poisoned by the sect leader, becoming resentful and vengeful. He wanted to tear apart anyone related to the death of the imperial concubine. Thien Lu Tuyen was determined to change the situation within the heavenly demon religion, making the Luk Dai Tong section no longer an easy target. Despite wanting to raise Thien Pham under his protection, it became increasingly difficult. Protecting the main protagonist became harder when it was difficult to find the culprit. The sect leader used him as bait, and 10 years later, on the first day Thien Lu Tuyen entered the demonic sect, the sect leader appeared. He couldn't hide his tension. Just seeing Thien Pham made him afraid. However, due to his authority, he couldn't show weakness. How could he not pay attention to his beloved child? His eyes continuously scanned the hundreds of disciples below. Just a glance, and he could recognize him. His facial expression resembles Huayan so much that it stung his eyes. Unable to bear it, he turned away, pretending to be indifferent. Did the Dharma Protector notice the child? The Dharma Protector couldn't accept his son's failure in passing the lowest level test of the demonic sect. 2 months later, before the level 3 test, the Sword sect also kidnapped him. They have used prisoners to study the demonic technique. Thien Lu Tuyen ordered the Ho Fap to arrest them all, with a kill order for any resistance. 3 years later, Zhejiang was captured back, and the situation worsened. The sect leader intended to form an alliance with the orthodox martial arts sects to defeat them, fearing a new conflict after 15 years. He was extremely anxious, not for his sect's doctrine, but for his return and his inability to protect his son. These opponents were more dangerous and aggressive than the master of the 6 paths he had faced before. During the confrontation, the sect leader felt like a mere child, unable to reach the realm of the mysterious opponent. He was manipulated until he managed to retaliate, but even after 10 moves, he could only defend himself. The opponent continuously repeated, "Not you," and finally delivered a blow. All the past images flooded Thien Lu Tuyen's mind, and he silently vowed not to die. If he did, the child would be left alone. Baek Trong Vu had examined and knew the truth, advising against using that martial technique. If he continues to use it, the consequences might worsen. However, at that moment, there was no other way to fight against the mysterious person inside. Unable to die, the blood-reversing great divine art surged once again. Thien Lu Tuyen used it, and his memory was erased. A fierce battle took place, and he only realized it ended when the opponent's sword pointed towards him. Thien Lu Tuyen didn't understand what had happened. The enemy withdrew upon hearing the Dharma Protector's words. He was disenchanted, unable to remember anything. Then the change occurred. Starting from the moment he appeared, the main disciple of the Celestial Overflow sect had been overwhelmed. If he kept pushing himself like this, what if he fainted? Who would restore order to the sect if not the sect leader? So, brother, don't exert yourself too much. Listen to those words and feel the fear creeping in. Think about your responsibilities, what you have, and what you stand to lose when sitting on the throne. Indeed, those whispers had unlocked the deadlock within. The temperament had changed, no longer the same as before. Yes, I will restore balance within this section and return to the present. The elders looked afraid as they stepped in at the sect leader. His eyes were reddened. Could he be displaying the blood demon technique? It seemed there was another mysterious figure secretly using telepathy to provoke our sect leader's anger. We must try our best to eliminate both the junior sect leader and the 6 major sects to accomplish this. If this place were to turn into a bloodbath due to your mistakes, it would be even better. The power of the celestial overflow sect was unclear, somehow reverting everything around. Many sect leaders were considering escape routes due to the conflicts between fathers and sons, causing great headaches. Once again, the demonic energy within him surged, his figure rapidly changing, a terrifying form about to be recreated, just like the second elder. Gradually, his voice changed significantly, revealing a monstrous creature devoid of reason. People in the great hall were running around in panic, but due to the random rocks flying, they could only stand still. Frantically, Pham quickly demanded the system to fulfill its Nano mission. Show me where these rocks will fall. Apparently, these objects were being controlled by the celestial overflow's divine power, moving at a certain speed, surpassing all terrains and the hail of rocks in the great hall. Pham's figure maneuvered everywhere, unable to stand still, watching innocent people suffer. Find a safe place. Go! Pham shouted loudly. Then he aimed straight for the sect leader to attack. Whoever opposed him would die. As he spoke, he struck the ground forcefully, controlling the troublesome stones. But he easily dodged them because he had analyzed their previous movements. With one hand, he firmly pressed on the sect leader's vital point of the celestial overflow, surprising him as he couldn't counterattack in time. So Nano continued his healing work. A huge electric current penetrated the sect leader's body as Pham's right hand touched it to absorb his demonic energy, while his left hand released toxic gases harmful to his father. He groaned in pain as the 2 energy streams clashed inside him. Indeed, Pham had no intention of killing him, but only wanted to help. After a while, the expulsion process ended, and the sect leader lost consciousness without movement. The scene in the Great Hall resembled a battlefield, yet everyone remained silent, not understanding what had just happened. Perhaps they couldn't believe that the junior sect leader, proficient in both martial arts and medicine, could achieve this. It wasn't luck, but thoroughly researched the body of the second elder before going into battle. Nevertheless, he couldn't trust the words of the great Dharma protector. He didn't consider himself an enemy, but instead protected him. If so, then I will listen to what you say from your own mouth, the truth, and there is another person to ask. Pham's image immediately disappeared, and he appeared in front of the mysterious figure who had continuously provoked the sect leader. With one hand, he controlled and interrogated him. Who are you? Indeed, without speaking, he already knew what he had done, but he remained silent, willing to confess anything. An elder explained that the person was Du Voi, the sect leader of the Prosperous Sword Sect. The Prosperous Sword Sect was one of the hidden enemies of the Celestial Overflow Sect. Pham transmitted his voice with the intention of executing the junior sect leader, but he heard everything and responded unexpectedly. How dare you, Du Voi? Now you're pretending to be ignorant? It's too dangerous if he really heard his own voice. If he wasn't careful, the plan would be exposed. So this person pretended to speak up for confession, but Pham wasn't fooled. Who allows you to speak up? Then another telepathic voice informed Du Voi that the plan had undoubtedly failed this time. We must accept mutual fate with the junior sect leader, and during that time, we will handle this and retreat immediately. The protagonist's gaze pierced straight out, recognizing the figure outside as Captain Buihin, realizing that the name Du Voi inside was displaying the rebellious bloodthirsty Dai La divine art. He knew the trick. It wouldn't work, so once again, he used nanotechnology to eliminate the demonic power from the man. But it seemed futile as the transformation process was too fast and his weak body couldn't keep up. At that moment, his arm was no longer there. The protagonist's arm was forcefully pushed back, followed by a powerful punch to attack. He blocked the Baho and Gok points, which the opponent had been moving through. Just as the heavenly profound technique was gently redirected, the protagonist continued to search for a way to suppress him. Once again, Duvo deflected forcefully elsewhere, then retreated to observe his actions. The protagonist, curious, couldn't understand why Duvo, using the rebellious bloodthirsty demonic technique, wasn't affected. It turns out they hadn't passed on the Daila Divine Art's rebellious bloodthirsty technique properly to their sect leader and sword demon sect. Its usage was limited to half an hour only. The surrounding sect leaders understood why the junior sect leader had acted recklessly with Duvo. They hastily joined forces to subdue him. However, the sword demon's aura made it difficult. He punched anyone who got close, causing severe internal injuries to many sect leaders. Nonetheless, they didn't falter. Another sect leader rushed to assist, wielding their vital energy, striking down quickly. Duvo timely shielded himself with the arm of another sect leader, continuously using offensive moves to take control. The opponent's body remained as rigid as when the sect leader used him. He crashed heavily to the ground, then repelled the attacker's chest. Why did this person have such strong scattering force? Putting that aside, he continued to accelerate, locating Thien Pham. At this moment, he was still standing idly, having not intervened yet. I just need half a minute to defeat your attacker, despicable family. The vital energy in his hand burst out like forming a long and sharp sword. Many sect leaders shouted a warning, but Duvo's speed was too fast. The demonic energy began to rise from the palm. With just one single slash, the giant figure froze immediately. Thien Pham's speed was 3 times faster. His muscular arm was quickly cut down. Although his gaze turned, he couldn't perceive anything. With just that simple strength, the rebellious bloodthirsty Dai La Divine Art was completely suppressed and severed by the counterattack. Do I need to go this far? Just leaving the head and torso would suffice for him to survive. However, the blood key in his body surged with anger. He leaped forward for revenge for his lost arm. You despicable scum! Do you think I'll stand still and accept death? The opponent dodged a few strikes and was right behind the protagonist. Just as he approached, the protagonist's eyes turned back, his demon sword unleashed again, lightly slicing his leg. Then dozens more slashes appeared, cutting off every limb, leaving nothing. Despite his remaining strength, he couldn't do anything more. He couldn't wield his limbs and could only rely on his mouth for combat. How could he be so strong? How could this happen to me? Regardless, I've given enough time for Buhin to retreat. Thinking of this, the Guardian Captain collapsed in front of Yen Mako. He had done this according to the orders of the Sovereign, without rest. He continued to command the Guardian Realm as the contemporary demon, controlling all the martial artists of the Fupchao Sword Sect and the Guardian Palace. If anyone resisted, they were to be killed outright. Everyone complied and paid respects. Then each went their separate ways to capture the rebels. Meanwhile, they were still at the Great Hall awaiting orders. Countless masters spread out everywhere. The 3 elders led a small group straight to the Guardians. They exuded their aura to suppress them, preventing resistance. Stop resisting futilely. Raise your hands and surrender. Though they surrendered, they couldn't accept it in their hearts. Unexpectedly, the sect leaders suppressed them so futilely. What to do now? You must be involved in the incident at the Great Hall, right? After saying this, he slashed the doubtful person's face, and the remaining one quickly folded. Despite his powerful sword technique, he remained unharmed. I'll block this side quickly and deal with your sect leader. Upon hearing the command, the nearby individual swiftly headed towards the area where the injured Tuyen was being tended to. In his mind, he thought to deal with the Guardian leader first to eliminate the guards, and then swiftly kill the sect leader. The sword in his hand was poised near the neck, but the title Guardian Leader wasn't just a title within his realm. Why didn't he recognize the danger? With just one hand, several nearby spirit swords flew swiftly, all converging towards the Guardian's body. Overwhelmed, he couldn't fend them off. As the Guardian Leader was reminded by the protagonist, your household seems to have underestimated me too much, don't you think? At this moment, Buichet Lam remained cold-blooded, cutting down people like slicing bananas on Thien Pham's orders. Whoever resisted was to be killed, leaving him no choice. Similarly, outside, the sect leaders acted similarly. Some Guardians, not understanding the situation, demanded an explanation as to why they were being treated this way. Is there a misunderstanding here? The contemporary demon had stated that anyone who resisted would be killed, so don't make us get involved. After the head of the former Vomcat sect said this, the innocent ones quickly surrendered. Inside, Duvoui felt powerless as without limbs, suicide was impossible. It turns out he had been following a plan since his time in the demonic sect to infiltrate the Thenma divine sect. However, things didn't go as planned when the contemporary demon appeared. Seeing Thien Pham, he mocked him. You think you've completely won, Don Tew. When I can't defeat you and your leaders, I'll send that guardian to hell. Do you think who is guarding the Huafap in the dungeon? The recent signal would make his subordinates roll on the cold prison floor. Just as he finished speaking, he laughed wickedly to provoke Thien Pham. However, he laughed for the wrong reasons as his eyes widened in surprise, not understanding the current attitude. At the southeastern dungeon, 2 guardians had their limbs incapacitated to prevent the use of power. Why did he truly say he was wrong? What's happening out there? Not just us, but perhaps even the senior elders assisting the junior sect leader were detained. And the most worrying thing is that the junior sect leader might be in danger. Master Sumain kept repeating, trying to find a way out. The sect leader, realizing he had been acupunctured, tried using his internal energy from his eyes. However, it wasn't easy. Some guards rushed over to remind them due to the commotion. As they were just blinded, they couldn't bear it anymore. Why were they in here and still unaware of the situation, planning to argue with us? 2 guardians bickered, causing the guards to become irritated, and they gave up as they knew they were suppressed. However, the signal had been transmitted, startling them. Then the sinister smile turned towards the person inside. Hua Fap was sweating profusely, realizing their intentions. Just as they were about to behead him, the explosion shattered the prison door. Someone recognized the situation and anxiously asked for their identity. The answer he received was just a punch. Ho Min recognized the rescuer. It was Nat Kiem of Thien Pham, who had come to rescue the sect leader and Loud, the sovereign's master. With the situation calming down outside, a few rushed in to stabilize it. Another figure swiftly arrived, kicking the 2 who just entered, causing them to lift off the ground, screaming in agony. Then the assistant of the protagonist appeared this time. Both Nai Kiem and Nat Kiem accompanied each other. Whoever infiltrated, capture them all. Bak Kai shook his head as he couldn't see the outcome of those kids yet still tried. However, Von Kat had rushed ahead and ordered his subordinate to follow. Meanwhile, at the Great Hall, Thien Pham played psychological games to extract information. Du Vo couldn't be left like this. It's clear he spared himself, meaning to extract information about the person behind him to survive, then tortured himself like this. It's better to reverse the internal energy and end this life than have such thoughts. Truong Lao noticed this, reminding the owner, "Pay attention, this person seems to still want to try, but it's useless. Don't be too complacent because we've overcome this danger. There is nowhere our sect's power cannot reach." His response was just a terrifying silence. The protagonist's hand emits a bright light, pressing onto the helpless body of Du Vo. But he remains fearless, raising his face, enduring the electric current coursing through him. This time, it seems that Thien Pham has maximized his strength. He screams in agony as his body is relentlessly tormented. Even the sect leaders watching cannot help but sweat in fear. At this moment, Du Vo looks no different from a beaten dog, his mind gradually regaining consciousness as the protagonist repeatedly slaps him to awaken him. After a while, his eyes and nose begin to regain awareness, feeling as if he had just escaped death. He appears quite surprised, wondering why his body is in such a wretched state. Indeed, the entire divine blood great law within him seems to have disappeared. Just a moment ago, was that sect mentioned? Yes, after the assembly hall was under control, the 4th elder and the 6th elder led their troops towards the residence of Pak Chu Kiem Tong. All the outer gates of the suburbs were sealed. It had been turned into an emergency system, making it impossible for anyone to easily escape. Despite such meticulous preparation, they couldn't foresee what awaited them. As they arrived, massive fires engulfed Phuk Chu Kiem Tong's residence. After 4 days, the Grand Guardian reported the situation to the sect leader. There were no survivors. Most had been burnt to ashes, and the remaining had taken their own lives. It seemed they were always prepared to erase all traces. How the investigation into Kiem Ma Tong and Du Vo was progressing, the Grand Guardian couldn't tell. Although they had investigated, they found no information. Everyone associated with the Fu Master Sword Sect within the Sword Demon Sect were just lifeless bodies of the Sword Demon Sect. Their soldiers had all been disbanded, and all interrogations had stalled. Among the palace guards, there were 14 individuals from Pak Chu Kim Tom on paper, but recently, 9 more had been added, and both were currently exchanging duties. Outside, the eldest elder had requested an urgent audience as there was something to report. The protagonist hadn't asked hastily, but was rather pleased that he had survived. Then, he started recounting the events 4 days ago when they fought Pak Chu Kien Tong. They realized the bodies of Pak Chu Kien Tong, Cha Kiem, and 4 others were missing. They said the tracking team and, through the network of connections, found them in Fujian Province and Zhejiang. Today, they received news from Fujian Province. According to the report, they found them but lost their trail. Neither blamed them. It was understood. Continuing the conversation, the protagonist reviews the entire territory of the Ma then Sect in the northern province of Fujian, Lei Tom woman, necessitating a crossing of the Changjiang River. Indeed, their prediction was correct. At the banquet with the martial arts masters, the palace guards also inspected the borders. So, the likelihood of Pak Chu Kim Tong's involvement with Kuk Dao Luk Vo Man was significant. The demon's sword provided further information. Pak Master Sword Sect, after losing to the Ma Then Sect in the north, submitted and worshipped demons and holy fire. It had been 60 years. It was perplexing why they had waited so long. The appearance of Chi Dao Luk Vo Man in the martial arts world just a month ago was too long to establish a connection. Remembering Duvo's words, Thien Pham was certain the sect he referred to wasn't Pak Chu Kien Tong. How to get him to speak again was the question. Lost in thought, he suddenly had a brilliant idea. Grand Guardian, prepare to leave. It seems I must visit Bok Trung Vu. Immediately after, Thien Pham and some of his subordinates headed to the inner sanctuary of Thien Ma Then Jiao, where Bok Trung Vu eagerly waited for news. Outside the gate, he waited to meet with the Keen Thien Ma. But before that, he had come to inspect the situation of Thien Lu Tuan at the request of the sect leader. He looked exactly as expected, with an air of arrogance not much different from a lion. His mouth kept uttering apologies, but it was incomprehensible. Looking at that scene, Thien Pham felt helpless. He wanted to know the truth about him and the hidden motives behind it, but unexpectedly things turned out like this. It was too much of a headache. So he temporarily set aside that matter to ask the divine physician a few things he didn't know. After the medicine found at the previous banquet hadn't been analyzed yet, the protagonist expressed satisfaction at Bok Trung Vu's talent. Then, at the Divine Palace, all the elders and sect leaders gathered again for a discussion. From outside the palace guards, an announcement about the contemporary situation of Thien Ma was made. Everyone stood up and immediately performed the rituals. Catching up to the main seat, Thien Pham found it puzzling to see another chair next to the sect leader's seat. It turned out to be the intention of those elders. Since the situation wasn't favorable, they had reluctantly joined forces with him. Could it be that they thought helping him wouldn't bring them any credit? No matter what happened, they expected to be repaid graciously later. Of course, the protagonist understood their intention implicitly. He moved at the extra chair as if it were merely a decorative piece, then sat down in his designated position. Elder Bui nervously stood up and pointed at the extra chair next to the sect leaders, but before he could finish his sentence, it turned into a pile of broken wood. Seems like he was mistaken, huh? Why would there be a chair next to him? The third elder felt powerless and didn't want to say anything. The 4 elders furrowed his brow because the force was too strong. Even a slight touch was enough to cause such damage. The elder Yin, on the other hand, felt that he was indeed a stubborn person. Bui Du Lam overlooked it and considered reorganizing the elders, but before he could speak, he was interrupted by the Grand Guardian, requesting a discussion about the succession of the sect leader. The others immediately responded, showing their disapproval. Before coming here, they had no idea about this matter. Why suddenly discuss something unplanned? As for the succession of the sect leader, they should wait until he regained consciousness and then discuss it properly. But it seemed the words of the third elder didn't carry any weight anymore. He seemed apprehensive because his authority was no longer as before. It was all rather ridiculous. Bui Du Lam understood that Thien Pham had built his own power and had previously destroyed all 3 major sections, leaving only half now. so he didn't know what to do. Only 3 people opposed this, right? The demon's sword still held its tone, and the green elders seemed to be waiting for this attitude. But unfortunately, no one stood by their side. It seems this number is too few compared to their desires. Boy Triathlon was tired and increasingly disillusioned. The elder lamented inwardly, thinking that Thien Pham had re-established his dominance and now controlled the majority. The Grand Guardian then straightforwardly asked if anyone objected, and a few arms went up, followed by a few more people voluntarily standing up, revealing their faces. But it seemed this number was too few for their liking. Boy Triathlon sobbed again. Feeling even more disheartened, the elders silently criticized those knave elders. The divine martial master has returned, and yet you still think things are as they used to be. Well, there's no other way. Bui Dai Long took a gamble again. He mentioned the rules of the sect, emphasizing that since there was a spy, the sect leader was caught off guard. Until he regained consciousness, they needed to wait, and the succession should be done properly according to procedures. They were trying to use the incumbent sect leader as an excuse. If the internal conflict continues like this, it wouldn't be good at all. Surely the contemporary divine martial master also found it very uncomfortable. The eldest elder stroked his beard, pondering, and then the 9th elder spoke up, responding to him about the issue of the unhealable demon sickness and the invasion of Kap Dao Lup Voman. Since they had occupied all the territory, it was more appropriate to consolidate their positions. This perfectly aligned with my intention. If the Batuai cannot heal, then invite a divine healer and wait until the head of the sect recovers. Proceed according to the procedure. The head of the sect remains so even if the demonic forces refuse to comply with the order. There's no reason to convene this meeting again if they refuse to relinquish their rights. As soon as they arrived, they could tell that they were just stalling for time to regain the power of the 3 sections. No one said anything. The leaders of the Sword Devil, Dark Devil, and Blessing Devil sects asked for permission to leave. Until the current head of the sect is fully recovered, we will not participate in this conference. The Great Law Protector is requesting the Guardians to stop this chaos. It's good that the worldly allows this because then we can clearly see who is a friend and who is a foe. That evening, the inner city of the heavenly sect's divine religion once again invited those elders to feast. However, they knew he was cunning and were cautious about the food, suspecting it might be poisoned. Only when enough people had gathered did the protagonist appear. The 3 elders performed the ritual and thanked the banquet for being well prepared. They all sat together and drank. Whenever the worldly emptied his cup, it seemed enough to make everyone feel at ease and not drink anymore. Ta Kim Q was planning to ask the heavenly sect for another position so he could share the power with Ben. However, Bui Triat Long thought differently. He felt that delegating power to the 3 strongest elders was sufficient. The position of sect leader, which the Heaven and Sword sects had monopolized for 100 years, was time to abandon, he thought. However, they were cautious, each speaking in riddles as they were already drunk. Surely he paid attention to us. Just by looking at his demeanor, one could tell he was meticulous. He did everything that no one had done before, even brought a chef from Trump Nguyen to prepare the meal. It must be something significant to go through all this trouble. When the beef is cooked, it must have smelled enticing. If the heavenly sect had organized this feast earlier, it would have been better. Everyone was suspicious of what the worldly was planning next. After everyone had eaten, he spoke about the main issue. Everyone was eager to know how much benefit they would gain. It wasn't clear how much we would receive, but we had to try to get as much as possible. Before that, I would like to talk about my demands first. What demands? Why is he suddenly saying something strange? Isn't it an agreement, meaning both sides get what they want? Bui Du Long was anxious. Hurry up and say it. Worldly. Don't drag it out. The first thing the protagonist would do when in power was to abolish the 6 great sect system that had existed for so long. This was undoubtedly beneficial to the heavenly sect. You've had a bit too much to drink, haven't you? But his face was so cold that no one dared to say anything more. All 3 remained silent to hear what the conditions were. What are the conditions? Let's reorganize the current elder system and base positions on capability. The 3rd ranking position will be determined by martial prowess. Each sect in this religion will be allowed to possess only one armed organization. All other organizations will be restructured just like the sections currently being managed. Before anything more could be said, Bui Long angrily slammed the table and threw the chair. It was unclear what he was thinking to act like that while being in the territory of the heavenly sect. In an instant, the sword of the great law was at his throat. What are you trying to do? The third elder transmitted his voice. I'm just stating my demands to facilitate smooth negotiations. But how can it be smooth when you're trying to turn us against each other? The protagonist continued to respond. It's not because I don't want to. That's why I went out to meet you, and I didn't bring any entourage. Cutting through the conditions you've set forth doesn't necessarily mean I want to usurp the power of all three sects, does it? Bui Long threatens that the forces of the Dark Devil, Sword Devil, and Blessing Devil were waiting outside, ready to act if there was any disturbance. Do you know that their numbers make up half of the people in this sect? Even if we lose those forces, we can still contain the 6 sects of extreme martial arts in the future. Isn't it true that the Demon Saber and the Devil Sword have to respond in place of their respective sect leaders, deliberately threatening the heavenly sect right now? Thien Pham was no longer using words but action with the 3 elders. It's too difficult to negotiate with you politely, he said. Then a powerful force accompanied by thunderous words echoed in the ears of all 3 elders, immediately causing them to kneel down. Any resistance gradually faded as they felt something strange coursing through their bodies. In moments, one felt chest pain and shortness of breath. Another felt fatigue, unable to muster any strength, while the third felt dizzy and nauseous, as if they were about to faint. One by one, they all complied, and just like that, the discomfort disappeared. Did you do something to us? One asked. Yes, it's poison. It's in your heads and will stay there. You'll sweat and suffer. If you don't listen to me or try to threaten, you'll experience excruciating pain until death. Truly, the old are deceived by the young. Bui Long regretted following the 3rd elder's advice, while the 4th elder, having eaten the beef heart, overlooked all these. Thien Pham continued to lay out his 4th condition. If anyone wants to become my disciple, they must offer something worthy. I request that each of the current sect leaders' wives submit an arm to me as a sign of loyalty. After the banquet ended, each person went back with their own intentions. Perhaps Thien Pham had achieved his goal, but he still seemed unsatisfied. The discord among the elders had finally been resolved, easing the burden that had plagued the sect for years. Under the golden waterfall, Bui Long's talk about the sect's forces also made him contemplate. Thien Pham thought, do the former sect leaders really worry about this? If they fear a decrease in power and can't eliminate the enemy within, there's only one solution: to build a massive force capable of handling them all. We need to nurture new experts to eradicate them. That won't take much time with me, will it? As he pondered, dawn broke, reminding him it was time to prepare for the ceremonial dress. So the first day had passed since the protagonist assumed the role of sect leader. At the great outer palace, the inner court of the heavenly sect was bustling with many sect members and leaders. Today was a significant day. The crowd was so dense that the guards were busy stabilizing the situation. The drums echoed, signaling the auspicious hour. It was a relatively significant day for Thien Pham. All the sect members were in orderly attire to celebrate with the sect leader. Time had flown so fast, it seemed like just yesterday they were fighting for the position of junior sect leader, and now this. People were curious why he hadn't taken it yet. Even though he was present, it seemed a bit unfair to him. Due to his weak cultivation, he couldn't stand alongside the 6 swords to observe the sect leader closely. The sect's regulations were strict. Only the rank of sect leader or higher could participate. Then Thien Pham's voice rang out, catching everyone's attention. Everyone, please maintain order. The 6 swords look up and see a figure. It turns out this old man has been appointed as the caretaker of the great palace. So before that, the boy had to maneuver through new relationships to get the appointment. The comrades below breathed a sigh of relief, having worried too much. Then it was time. The drums boomed again. The great law protector led the procession, followed by many servants, fully equipped for Thien Pham. Everyone knelt down to await the sect leader's arrival. Next life, as the faithful followers of the great heavenly devil sect, accept the decree of the heavenly sect in my hands. The inauguration ceremony of the sect leader of the great heavenly devil sect will be held right now. Thus, the protagonist, 7th prince, not belonging to any faction, stepped out from within, still the sect leader but no longer a celestial proclamation. He remained a protector and still had 2 seniors supporting him wholeheartedly, the demonic sect. Following the cheers and excitement, his former comrades, now all smiling, were pleased with the day's accomplishments. They couldn't miss the significance of the occasion. They all reverently performed the ceremony, celebrating the happiest day for the sect leader. Only Van Q seemed to know how meaningful this was. From now on, he couldn't call him Young Master anymore, but Thien Pham still maintains the same demo as the first time they met at the demonic sect. Master had not made a wrong choice in selecting his first disciple. The tavern owner raised his eyebrows. How did that drunkard end up boasting so much? Still, he went back to his business, watching the old leaders leave with satisfaction. Thien Pham calmly stepped onto the platform to receive his position. He had countless thoughts in his mind, perhaps the happiest being the wives of the former sect leaders, from a timid boy to a mature leader at the demonic sect, and thus a legend in the great heaven demon sect was born, the contemporary demon sect leader of the southern mainland, always whispering to himself that he would never allow the sect to regress. All dangers and evil will be eradicated when he holds power. Now is the time for him to step onto the altar to meet the newly discovered disciples. Below, excited youths were already buzzing with anticipation, faster than he had anticipated. The great court had solemnly read out the request for the 24th generation sect leader to accept the decree. Looking at the celestial decree before him, Heavenly Pham performed the ritual ceremoniously, the blood loyalty of the great heaven demon sect. Heavenly Pham humbly accepted the celestial decree, boldly stating that he would carry out the next steps to assist his master. He looked as if he were about to cry, seeing how the former adversary had now become the most loyal subordinate. Congratulations to the new sect leader, a moment the god will never forget. His hands trembling, he accepted the torch, as did I, and I will never forget this moment. Tears welled up in my eyes, unable to look straight at him. Slowly, he raised the torch to the highest place in the grand hall. The flames erupted fiercely, much like his authority. I will burn this body in the sacred fire, without regret, whether living or dying. My path will be illuminated, all doubts will be swept away. This is the creed of the great heaven demon sect, reiterated by the sect leader as an affirmation to lead the sect forward with strength. His words were clear, repeated continuously, echoed by the cheering crowd, following the leader. And then, the climax arrived. The celestial decree lay in the hands of the great court, and according to the celestial decree, the position of sect leader would be passed on to the contemporary demon sect leader, the 24th generation. Heavenly Pham, please accept this duty calmly. Bowing respectfully, he received it within himself. Someone immediately rushed out, something he also sensed, not understanding what was about to happen. Why was there such ordinary martial arts aura? Looking up, he saw Jiang Jiahan, the former guardian, right in front of him, tears streaming down his face, congratulating the son-in-law in heaven. They would surely be very happy together, embracing each other warmly, disregarding all the trivialities of the sect. Heavenly Pham was also moved, unable to hold back his tears, silently thanking his most loyal subordinates for preparing such a wonderful gift. Having received the position, he also actively moved forward towards the stream of demonic energy, years of effort now within the grasp of his hands. This was what the people had always awaited, the expectation of future generations. And that beloved woman smiled, marking the 24th generation sect leader of the great heaven demon sect, the second demon to be born. This moment was recorded in the history of Central Heaven Demon Sect, a momentous occasion. Time passed, 3 months since Pham took office as sect leader, during which the sect underwent many changes. Firstly, through the policy that each faction would have only one direct subordinate group, with all others becoming part of the sect's forces. There were objections, but now the powers were balanced. So many supported Pham's declaration. Number of groups and teams each faction owned would depend on the rank of the faction leader representing them. This would provide opportunities for small and medium-sized factions and efforts to prevent dominant factions from gaining too much power. Emphasis on this capability would not only apply to factions after they became leaders. Within 2 months, Naman had organized a large assembly to select new elders, not only choosing new elders but also redefining the positions of existing elders. The minimum criterion for participation was to reach the pinnacle realm, and to become an elder, one had to achieve the transformation realm. Since no one at the first assembly reached the transformation realm, the standards were relaxed. summarizing both the results of internal cultivation and those passed down by the authorities. 45 people registered to participate, of whom 32 passed the preliminary martial arts and strength rounds. There were also hidden experts who stood out, with the chief of the Dream Emperor sword being the top, Lamb. Everyone was amazed because within the same faction, there were two individuals who had reached the transformation realm. This person displayed remarkable talent, as he had previously fought on the Western Front of Kweichow, gaining a wealth of experience in overcoming life and death situations and experiencing numerous enlightenments. The second person was the chief magistrate of the northeastern province of Honam, Duong Dan Ho. He had mastered the transformation realm skillfully, despite his humble origins in this province. Due to his love for battles, he had come to Honam, and although he had concealed himself in the martial world, he became very interested when the extreme Tao 6 martial arts emerged. Lastly, the third person was the one recommended by the Great Court, Tu Thien Ma. Let me tell you about Thu Dang, who had been on Kwai Duong Sea Island for 15 years, a place well known to most elders. The inner historian sect was originally responsible for recording the deeds of our sect, but the mystic ghost sect constantly interfered with their recording, and they couldn't stand it anymore. Thus, they led a night raid, but the mystic ghost sect had long embedded spies within the inner historian sect, so the raid failed. Not wanting to waste their forces, he reported the matter to the court. Thu Dang, who specialized in writing records, was absolutely loyal, so he immediately surrendered to the soldiers of the Great Court. Although all the major factions wanted to execute him, the Supreme Sect leader did not abolish his martial arts, but sent him to Kwai Duong Island, recognizing his talent. Heavenly Pham immediately ordered the Great Court and spread the news, allowing Thu Dang, who had been waiting for this order for 15 years, to finally return home with the rebirth of the demon. The second era of the Great Heaven Demon Sect was about to be opened, and the elder appointment ceremony had already taken place, based on their abilities. All positions had been completely changed. The Mystic Ghost Sect and the Sword Demon Sect had disappeared, and the Sword Demon Sect leader declared that all his opponents had disappeared and had been eliminated in the second round, so they could not enter the senior ranks. Thu Dang had defeated Lady Yen Mu-ho and had cultivated the 34th Devil Sword of the Sword Demon Sect to become the first elder in 15 years of exile on Kwai Duong Island. This had allowed him to cultivate his martial arts and achieve the ultimate transformation realm order. When Lady Yen Mu-ho became the second elder, followed by Lady Van Yen and Duong Dan Ho in positions 5 and 6 respectively, Buichet Long of the Dream Dragon Tomb and Hon Kiem Sect each had 2 elders. At position 8 was the Dream Ao, at 9 was Taman Gayet, and at 10 was Ta Kim Kufuk of the Dream Demon Sect. The weakest was Hang Tadu of the Yin Demon Sect, who, although not yet at the transformation realm, had excellently achieved the position of the 12th elder. Chao Chu Dum of the Nine Gate Sect became the 13th elder. This was the biggest change in 500 years. Heavenly Pham had passed a grand assembly to propose a bold plan to organize a major elder appointment ceremony every 5 years. The purpose of this was to encourage those who had become elders to continue to improve themselves and to open up opportunities for other factions to also become leaders at any time. The competitors were not only the elders, but also the expansion of the palace guards. The inner and outer palace guards would be divided into 6 sword groups, and their subordinates would have to compete with each other. Most of the soldiers in the sword groups were subordinates of Heavenly Pham who had been conquered in the demon realm. All sword groups agreed to let the political arena appoint the chief palace guards. Most things had been reformed, but only the Great Court remained the same as before because they had always maintained tradition since the time of the Heavenly Demon Master. In those 3 months, an intense battle had taken place, along with the extreme Tao 6 martial arts. The new chief elder of the southern faction easily won. The internal extreme Tao 6 martial sect was very determined, so there were no major issues to be wary of temporarily. In case of emergencies, the 4 elder leaders decided to temporarily station in the north of Putkin to observe the situation of the frontier. They took advantage of the absence of the 3 major martial sects and chose the perfect time to disperse their forces. The envoy of the martial world also sent a letter of congratulations and greetings to the newly appointed martial sect leader. Along with this, News of the martial arts convention arts scheduled for the beginning of the year had been postponed due to an investigation by the internal elder leaders of the martial world, suspecting infiltration by another sect of the extreme Tao Sixth Martial Sect. With many participants, it was not immediately possible to identify the investigation. Due to the complexity of the situation, investigations on Duvoi and Buihin were difficult and time-consuming, so they had been temporarily suspended. During this time, the illness of Thien Lu was relatively severe, and Bok Trung Vu was at his wit's end. Finally, Thien Pham only thought of the divine doctor at the Great Protectorate of the Central Yuan, who had sent someone to find out that the divine doctor was located in the Pho Kiem Cup in the Hubei province, the gathering place of aristocratic families and martial arts sects. It was understood that there would be many people spying on the divine doctor during the meeting, making it very dangerous to meet. Ma Kiem expressed condolences to him, so he sent experts of the sect to go on reconnaissance missions beforehand. It was decided to send experts unknown to outsiders. The second elder and the bone flower of the six swords, along with Bok Kai, were specially dispatched. Yen Mako was very suitable for this mission, as she also wore a mask disguising herself as a few spies of the Dark Path sect. Currently, at the martial arts arena, there was a small competition happening, and the six swords had trained privately with the martial sect leader. Even Van Q was involved in this competition. From the observation deck of the Great Protectorate, everything was closely watched. Only Thien Mao was faster than everyone else. It was unclear how Thien Pham had progressed to such an astonishing level. Initially, it seemed simple, but he combined internal energy and added divine techniques, making his movements unpredictable. Just tracking him with the eyes was already difficult for them. Meanwhile, Cao Vuong Cat was outside, waiting to seize the opportunity to notice any openings from the sect leader. He found it perplexing because there seemed to be no way to counter Thien Pham's attacks. As he was contemplating this, the protagonist approached, landing a light punch that broke a few ribs. Nat Kiem cried out in pain. After that blow, he turned to the others, intending to finish them off. Conveniently, he added another strike to Cao Vuong Cat. His massive body flew straight towards Van Q. Fortunately, both she and Tai Thatch Kim managed to evade in time. It was unbelievable. Why couldn't they harness their abilities? Thien Pham was becoming increasingly powerful each day. His martial arts displayed today were vastly different from his usual techniques. It resembled more of acrobatics. Thien Pham had combined all kinds of martial arts from the sect, thanks to Nano and the system's analysis of Dai La's divine martial arts, integrating them into his own body. Despite his exceptional skills in the sect's martial arts, he still needed to be even stronger because there were countless experts in the Central Yuan. Nat Kiem unfortunately fell backward, perhaps both were exhausted. Thien Pham hurried over to inquire about the condition of his subordinates, asking if they were injured. Indeed, he was formidable. The four of us couldn't match him. Thien Pham was very modest. He was trying very hard to reach the realm of mystery, but he hadn't achieved it yet. At that moment, the temporary elder leader rushed in to deliver urgent news. The sect leader had received a letter from the headquarters of the Dark Path sect in Hubei City. After hearing it, the protagonist understood that this was news from the group of experts they had sent out before. They were currently searching for the missing divine doctor at the Pho Kiem Cup. They had arrived there 10 days ago, and were currently looking for a temporary lodging to rest. The innkeeper had given them directions enthusiastically. Passing through that forest, they would reach the upper-class area of the Blood Valley. He also warned that entering there would only lead to death. I just want to tell you that going there on a foggy day is as good as courting death. However, the elder leader and the two six swords disregarded this and continued their journey. They wandered for several days in the dense fog of the Pho Kiem Cup. After a while, they finally spotted a signpost indicating the area where the divine doctor resided. Yen Mako noticed some strange sounds and hesitated whether they should follow those sounds. She ordered the group to obey her command, and so the four of they continued to venture deeper inside. However, the deeper they went, the more mysterious sounds they encountered. The people around still didn't understand what was happening when suddenly a certain fierce energy surged towards them. Yen Mako swiftly drew her sword for defense. A mysterious figure flew past the group of experts of the Thien Ma sect, and then, 20 days later, at the basin of the Huangha River, The sect leader and his loyal followers went to investigate the disappearance incident. Upon seeing the loyal followers of Thien Pham, the fourth elder, Duong Dan Ho, appeared melancholic. His first task after taking office as the elder leader was not to engage in battles but to lead the way in the central Yuan. It's a must. Otherwise, the Great Protectorate would have had to go directly, and then the sect leader. If we pass the Huang Ha River, we will reach the territory of the sect that uses masks, and no one will recognize us. It could be very dangerous, so I'm even more worried. If we go down, we'll see a bustling area right here, with many people passing by. We should be quick rather than reckless. Van Q was very excited to be on a boat for the first time. This action of Thien Pham's was secretive, but all the 6 swords wanted to follow him. He only chose the 2 most trusted people because the rest of the 6 swords were too powerful, and he was afraid they would attract attention. Van Q thought Nat Kim was too impulsive and might cause trouble, and now he was worried about the safety of the second sword, Ngai. It seemed that Ho Bom trusted Bok Kai very much. The fourth elder really couldn't understand how he could sit at the same table with these 2. He knew Ho Bom was a special advisor specializing in security at the main electrical hall. No matter how you looked at it, his position in the sect's hierarchy was higher than that of the 6 swords. He was at the peak of the sect's hierarchy, but he still focused on using people and emphasizing the strength of the sect leader, which was still unbelievable. Anyway, as long as he was recognized as loyal, during the 10 days, I had supported the sect leader wholeheartedly without rest. The sect leader is currently using a mask to disguise his true face. It's sweet, even sweeter that he's a highly skilled martial artist, second only to the sect leader in the 6 swords. However, the most surprising thing is that the current head of the Thien Ma sect is the second Thien Ma in the history of the sect, and he's not even 20 years old. He managed to dissolve half of the 6 great sects twice to save the sect from danger. It's hard to believe. Duong Dan Ho thought he really wanted the opportunity to compete with Thien Pham once they crossed over. After the group of Thien Pham's people set foot in Hubei, they traveled continuously for 5 days without rest. Fortunately, Duong Dan Ho had lived in the northeast of the southern lake, so they could move smoothly without difficulty. Finally, the 4 of them reached the vicinity of the Pho Kiem Cup, the northwest. The 4th elder was worried because if they continued, it would be dark again, and it was about to rain. Ho Bom saw an inn and headed straight there to rest. Thien Pham agreed for everyone to stay overnight here. He felt that this place was extremely dangerous and strange to him. As for the martial arts skills of Yen, the elder leader Bok Kai, and the Bone Flower, I don't think they will be easily defeated. But we're almost there. Please everyone, let's not have any trouble. Arriving at the inn, Van Q noticed that it wasn't very spacious, but there was a place to lean back, which was good enough. Duong Dan Ho led the group inside. As he opened the door, he became very cautious upon seeing the people inside. We'd done our best to avoid any conflict with orthodox martial artists, and yet we still have to meet them. Why did I suddenly encounter the martial artists of the Vodang sect here, and then thunder and lightning accompanied by a torrential rainstorm swept in as if on cue? Duong Dan Ho felt uneasy because even before any confrontation, he was already facing the martial arts sect, despite their leader wearing a mask. However, if the orthodox martial arts sect knew about their whereabouts, it would be hard to escape. Thus, he transmitted a message to Thien Pham that there were members of the orthodox martial arts sect present. Though they were mostly minor disciples, the martial artists were from the Vodang sect. So what should they do now? The protagonist also surveyed the surroundings to assess the situation. He suggested it would be best to avoid them to prevent unnecessary trouble. Just as he mounted his horse and was about to leave, he was immediately approached by a deputy minister who reminded him not to show any emotions. So, he remained silent and stealthily made his way back to his seat, where nobody exchanged a word, waiting only for the innkeeper to take their orders. Duong Dan Ho continued observing Thien Pham's 2 subordinates, Van Kut and the deputy minister, who indeed seemed tense. It was said to be the first time the sect leader had shown himself, yet he remained unusually calm, making it hard to decipher his thoughts. The sect leader was undoubtedly brave, and shortly after the host left, he stepped out to inquire about the guests, mentioning they only served dinner. When asked about lodging, he hesitated, unsure of how to respond. Given the inclement weather and the influx of guests, there was only 1 room left. albeit a bit cramped. The deputy minister hesitated, not knowing what to do because the sect leader couldn't stay with them. A martial artist approached from the adjacent table, indicating they might be short on rooms. So, he decided to give up the room to the newcomers, introducing the martial artist as a senior member of the Vodang sect, who agreed to give up the room. Duong Dan Hoa immediately stood up, expressing gratitude, while observing the three men who appeared to be martial artists. Then he offered assistance, noting that the senior member hadn't identified them as members of the demonic sect, mistakenly believing they were from the orthodox martial arts sect. The boy seemed relieved, not understanding why Thin Pham was so restrained about trivial matters. The deputy minister understood they were the only ones who had revealed their martial arts skills, so the Vodang disciples had misunderstood their identity. However, he wondered whether the sect leader and the Taoist master had the same goal. Disregarding trivial matters, the minister reminded the sect leader to prioritize the search for the missing martial artists to find the enemy's whereabouts. He hoped for better weather the next day to make traveling easier. Perhaps the rain would stop early in the morning. The innkeeper, serving while speaking, mentioned that he had lived here for nearly 30 years and hadn't experienced heavy rain, just showers. He then continued to inquire about the guests' reasons for visiting the sword refining flask. Just as he finished, the diners began emitting a tense atmosphere, turning to listen to Thin Pham's group's response. He cautioned them to be careful, as speaking carelessly would cause trouble. Hence, he advised against going into the valley, where only people entered and never returned, except for the special faction. In response, the leader stated that not long ago, some guests who appeared to be martial artists entered the valley, but they never returned. As he spoke, thunder roared again, startling everyone. Thin Pham continued to inquire about what was inside, to which the innkeeper, a mere merchant, couldn't possibly know. In conclusion, Thin Pham warned them once more, suggesting they leave as soon as the rain stopped, as there might be fog afterward. He urged them not to venture into the valley, as many people were afraid there were too many people here, and if the rain stopped at dawn, they should leave quickly. Duong Dan Ho planned to wait for fewer people to further inquire, as many were eager to eavesdrop. Meanwhile, Thin Pham listened intently to the Vodang disciples' stories, noting that they seemed distressed, especially when they mentioned encountering a divine physician. It seemed certain that there was a divine physician in the sword refining,